Imagine a world where customers could have a seamless experience across all channels: voice, web, chat, email, text, WhatsApp, or whatever comes next. And where agents would have visibility into the customer's journey and their data before answering that call or chat. They could anticipate the customer's need and even perhaps recommend other solutions. Now imagine how much more satisfied your customers and agents would be. I'm Laura Fraser, and I'm the AWS Partner Development Manager working on the strategic partnership with Salesforce. I'm joined by Chantel Love with Pearson. She's the VP of Customer Success, and she's going to share today about Pearson's journey with AWS and Salesforce that led to significant improvements in customer satisfaction. Mark Rudkowski is our resident expert in contact center technology. Mark is a principal product manager with Amazon Connect, and he's worked on Salesforce integrations since 2017. He has some exciting news to share today, including a demo, so stay tuned, as we launch Salesforce Contact Center with Amazon Connect right here in this session. All right, let's get started. Customer service leaders are expected to do more with less nowadays. They need to drive down the cost to serve while increasing revenue contribution. That's not an easy task. Pardon me. They're transforming their organizations into places where loyalty can be driven, where it's beyond the customer issue that's being solved. And asked to create net new revenue streams for their companies. So let me dive into a study that was done by Qualtrics, recent survey, that shows that 55% of customer service issues go unresolved the first time. That means every other customer interaction is not getting solved, and customers have to come back to you. And when they come back for that second call, their satisfaction decreases dramatically by 22%. So what does that mean for your business? We're talking about dealing with frustrated customers, potential revenue loss from dissatisfied customers, and long-term damage to your brand reputation. So the question isn't really whether you can afford to address this issue, it's whether you can afford not to. Some additional statistics that might give you some hope here. When satisfied customers are happy with your company, they're 62% more likely to spend with you. And when they receive empathy from the agent that they're talking to on the phone, they're 2 times more satisfied with your organization versus how long they waited on hold. So if you think about this, empathy beats efficiency. And think about the connection. When we combine first contact resolution with genuine empathy, we're not just solving problems, we're creating opportunities for revenue growth. So you say, Laura, it's all about empathy. Well, how does one affect that? That's where technology can help. Omnichannel text and speech analytics help to pinpoint customer emotion and sentiment and allow for agents in real time to respond with empathy to the customer. And when coupled with real-time transcription, artificial intelligence can help to clarify customer intent, identify solutions, and automate next best actions, including upsell opportunities. This is why 4.5 years ago, we introduced with Salesforce Service Cloud Voice with Amazon Connect, the first natively integrated telephony solution with Service Cloud. Service Cloud Voice offers a consolidated view of the customer data and their journey, along with call controls, real-time transcription, and next best actions, all from within the Service Cloud console. This eliminates the need for agents to switch between different applications during or following a call. And with unified channels, calls can be easily deflected to chatbots for simple issues, which will help lower costs and get customers their answer faster. Or when the customer's issue is more complex, they can seamlessly be routed to an agent with all the context captured in one place. By combining the power of Amazon Connect and Service Cloud, customers get pre-integrated deployment and speed and continued innovation from 2 enterprise-grade solutions. You can now focus on delivering new features faster to increase your customer satisfaction and loyalty. And we're very proud to report that this solution now has over 1,000 customers, and it's used by over 100,000 agents globally. Customer adoption has been broad across industries and different geographies, including customers like Toyota Motor North America, and I know you're here in the audience somewhere, so thank you. Air Canada Cargo, Credit Karma, Sonos, Saks, and many others. So rather than hearing from me about the product, let's hear from a real live customer, Pearson, about their experience since 2023. Chantel, can you start by introducing us to Pearson and tell us about your journey?
Absolutely, thank you, Laura. For those of you that may not be familiar with Pearson, Pearson is the world's largest learning company. I specifically work for Clinical Assessments, which is a division that serves school districts, government entities, and private practitioners across the nation. And we provide them with clinical and psychological assessments to meet the learner where they are in their journey. So as we begin this conversation, I want to ask you this question. Show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the game Wobble? Okay, I see a couple hands. Show of hands, how many of you have no idea what the game of Wobble is? Okay, that's more like it. The people who raised their hands and said they knew what Wobble was, you want to get in touch with them because they're the next iteration of AI because we just made this game up. Okay. So, let me explain what Wobble is. It's a spin-off of a game that's trademarked that we can't speak about. But my first time hearing about this game, Wobble, was actually at an event that I was attending. Outside of my workload at Pearson, I'm also a speaker and an author of the game-changing book, Promote Your Damn Self. And I was at this event and we were playing this game and I had never heard of it, but I was very intrigued about this game. The thing about this game is it's often played with what we like to refer to adult beverages. It's not quite 5 o'clock here, but we are in Vegas, but we're gonna skip the adult beverages. But let me explain to you why I want to talk more about this game Wobble. The way this game works, it reminds me of my day-to-day in life, if you will. There are players that are expected to read jumbled phrases from a card. And then once they read these jumbled phrases from the card, they're working with a group, like people in this room. They work with a group of individuals. You're challenged with time pressures to solve this problem, and you have to make sure that you're utilizing the best types of communication to get this clear answer to solve this problem. The reason why this is so relevant is because I'm going to have you play this game right now. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you this card on the screen, and you're probably thinking to yourself, these words don't make sense, and that's how we wobble. So as we read the words on this screen, you'll see something that says more kit ting strut EG. I heard someone say it out loud. So show of hands, who knows how to dissect this wobbled up phrase that's incoherent? Show of hands who know it. Okay, I see a couple of them. All right, show of hands who does not have any idea what this means. It's okay, you're in a safe space. Thank you, thank you. So I am going to reveal that this more kit ting strut EG is actually marketing strategy. I see some shaking your heads, and some of you I wish I had some prizes to give away, some bonuses. But marketing strategy. And the reason why I introduced this game is because when I think about our telephony transition, it feels something like this game Wobble. I want you to imagine your entire telephony system like the game that we were just playing. I want you to think of how that could look for you. Well, if you're thinking about how that could look for you, I'm going to tell you how it looks for us. The telephony transition that we had, it had an array of challenges. We found ourselves wobbling all over the place, if you will, trying to figure out how to make these systems work together. We also found ourselves working with legacy technology, new technology, and we were working with an array of technology across a diverse global organization. I sometimes find myself equating the analogy to my son. My son is 7 years old and he's a self-proclaimed gamer. I'm a child of the 80s and I grew up playing the Atari. The Atari is about this big, and my son plays Nintendo Switch, which is about this big, and the games are about this small. Now imagine putting a Nintendo Switch game that's this small into an Atari and imagining it working. It likely won't, because I saw some heads and some laughter, and that's what we went through. Additionally, just like the game, we needed to decipher our current state, identify where we were, and be honest about where we were so that we can figure out where we wanted to go. We also needed to take into consideration how to communicate across all teams. That wasn't just the function of communicating with our customer service arms, but we had to take into consideration every unit, every business unit that interacted and engaged with our customers. Additionally, we found ourselves having to work quickly to find a solution. And the reason we found ourselves working quickly to try to find a solution is because our implementation started in 2022, right in the heart of the pandemic. So we had to find a solution that worked quickly. And lastly, just like the game of Wobble, we found ourselves trying to make something that was seemingly incoherent into something that was coherent. Now, as I tell you more about our transition, we found ourselves at several crossroads during this telephony transition. And in the spirit of a learning company, there was one quote that we found ourselves going back to. And that quote was this one: "The biggest room in the world is not in Dubai, it's not man-made. The biggest room in the world is room for improvement." And as we were thinking about how we identify the best partner and the best vendor, was not just to focus on our current state, but was to focus on the room for improvement. Now, as we are talking about our journey, I want to tell you where we started. It kind of feels like I want to say we started from the bottom, the absolute bottom, because we were in this space where I stepped into a role as a previous sales leader and stepping into a role of customer success, and those worlds were completely different. And as we were evaluating our telephony system, the first thing that came to mind that was the biggest challenge for us, if I'm being honest, since I'm amongst friends, the challenge for us was the fact that we were a global entity, a global organization, and we did very well when we were in the office. We can monitor calls, we can hijack, we can walk up and see the activity. However, with our previous telephony system, it wasn't ready for the future. We found ourselves struggling to listen to calls and monitor calls, and we were finding ourselves trying to plug into other systems just to make it work. And for those of you who are experienced in contact centers, there's no equation that equals success without the ability to monitor or inspect what you expect, right? So we were in that space. We also found ourselves navigating the fact that at the time of our transition, we had well over 17 different phone lines in the US, Some were active, some were non-active. We found ourselves experiencing challenges with porting phone numbers over. We found ourselves dealing with an array of challenges that centered around data. We all know that bad data in gives bad data out. So we had to go through this process of being honest and cleaning up our current state in order to get to our future state. And as we were working with our previous telephony vendors, we had 3 different vendors that were providing telephony services for our organization. Now, as I stand up here representing clinical assessments and sharing our story and our journey, we were actually the first of several transitions that took place in our 40,000 employee organization. So we were more or less the guinea pigs, and we had a lot to learn as we were going through this transition. The other things that I will call out as we were trying to get started, we had to evaluate our current QA systems. We had to evaluate how we support and engage with our sales organization. We also had to evaluate what our customers were expecting. Because in this whole equation of telephony, you can get a brand new system, it can work, it can shine, it can sparkle, but if it doesn't solve the problem for your customers, and if it doesn't solve the problem for your organization, you're at a disservice. So we found ourselves in that space for a really long time. Now, the other thing that I want to take into consideration and call out with our transition is that we did our transition in waves. And as we did our transition in waves, we realized that we wanted to start with our biggest business unit, which was in the US. And then we found ourselves transitioning to our Asia Pacific markets, which was next, and then our Europe, Middle East, and Africa markets, which were following that. And what I will say is that one of the things that I would encourage anyone in this room who's thinking about doing a global transition is to have a global process. And we found ourselves not necessarily having a global process. We had to backwards design. And what I mean by that, we were thinking through the end result and the experience that we wanted to create. We wanted to think through the things that our agents and our champions were calling out. We've spent a lot of time doing sentiment analysis to identify trends and traits that our customers and our clients were asking for. And those things were clarity in calls. Those things were intelligent IVR. Those things were options and avenues where they didn't have to wait for low value or non-value add tasks. So we were taking into consideration all of those things as we were backwards designing our process. Now, as we were backwards designing this process, I spoke a little bit about data, and we had a lot of it. We had data in places that it didn't belong. We had to be honest about what contact center looked like. We had our sales team taking customer service calls, so we didn't have appropriate data at the time. We were a pass-through for our European markets, so we weren't able to identify all of that data that was passing through for the European markets, and the time that it took to actually get the data right and clean to hand over to our partners. So we took a great deal of time to make sure that our data was migrated appropriately. The next thing that we had to take a look at was system configurations. As I alluded to earlier, we had 3 different telephony systems that we were using in our what's seemingly small business unit, and they weren't talking to each other. So we had to really lean in and work with the subject matter experts at with Salesforce Cloud, Salesforce Service Cloud, and AWS and NeuroFlash to really lean into figuring out the best solution to get our systems configured appropriately to minimize and to basically avoid the opportunity, or the instance, I should say, of us not having active phone lines. Because when you're doing a massive transition, you're overlaying the old phone line with the new phone line to minimize disruption. So we were really, really leaning into that to avoid having any disruption in our service for our customers. The other thing that was critical, and I would say that this was probably the most important step for us, was our change management methodology. And we took an inside-out approach to our change management methodology because as you think about a telephony change, it's not just changing a phone number. There's differences in systems, there's differences in reporting, there's differences in certain outputs just depending on how your organization is structured. So we wanted to make sure that as we were thinking through our change management methodology, we weren't just thinking about how do we train our staff to be prepared for this new system that we're working through. We needed to think through our fail-safes. What happens if this system completely shuts down and it doesn't work the first day? What happens if we launch an APAC and it's 9 o'clock at night and no one's awake in the US? What happens if we start using the phone system and our agents and our champions don't have the right level of support if something doesn't go correctly? So as we were thinking through our change management process, we wanted to ensure that we did not miss the opportunity to take an inside out and an outside in approach to our transition. The next thing we wanted to make sure that we were certain of is QA testing. As I spoke about in the game Wobble, we wanted to move quickly, but one of the things we didn't want to sacrifice and move too quickly on was our QA testing. I think, as you're thinking about any type of transition that you've done in your organization, from a small magnitude or a large magnitude, the QA testing is critical before you actually launch. You're wanting to make sure that things work the way that you envision. You want to test it in a safe environment before things go live. You want to make sure that the systems or the other tools that you're integrating into this system that you're using functions appropriately. So we spent a great deal of time and we had to slow down to speed up in order to get to this space of making sure that our QA testing was top-notch. And then lastly, our agents' favorite part was user training. Getting our agents and we refer to them as champions, so I'll say champions from this point forward. As I refer to my champions in my organization, they played a critical role in this transition, and I want to call this out because oftentimes as executives and leaders, we can think of things from high up and miss the people who are actually utilizing the systems and services that we use. So as we were going through user training and actually QA, we brought in our champions into the conversation to ensure that we weren't missing the opportunity to ensure that they were bought into this transition, that they were giving us a perspective that we may not have had because we're not as close to those customers as we would like to be. And that itself gave us a great framework as we started to do our user training. Now, I am going to give you the fun part. I'm going to let you know how it's going. After we dealt with a series of messes and got to this point of really being able to launch our telephony system, the things that I want to call out are cost. Within the first year of our transition, we immediately saw a cost reduction. And a function of the cost reduction is that we saw less phone calls because they weren't being routed to one of the 16 of the phone lines that they didn't belong to, right? We also saw a cost reduction in the fact that we can utilize tools like next best action. So we have an inbound contact center that's now functioning as a customer success organization that can prompt a customer on upsell and cross-sell opportunities. And then we also saw a cost reduction in the fact that our previous state and our current state immediately saved us money. And immediately, I won't say immediately, about 12 months later, we were able to realize a savings of $2.5 million by transitioning our telephony system. The other thing that is supported is globalization. We are in a space where we're striving to become a contact center that functions like a follow the sun model. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the follow the sun model, we want to be able to meet our customers, regardless of the geography, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And while that's a work in progress, we could not do that before because everyone was on a different phone system And we weren't able to see the data, we weren't able to see average handle time, we weren't able to see first call resolution or any of those key contact center metrics. So this itself has enabled us within the last year and a half to take our contact center in APAC in their morning time to support calls later in the day in the US. So that's been a great success for us, and also I kept this up, a cost saving measure where we didn't have to necessarily ramp up and ramp down for that hour or two period of time where we were seeing increased call volume. The other thing that I will call out is customer satisfaction. And I cannot talk about customer satisfaction if I'm not going to speak about employee satisfaction. If you talk to your employees and you give them space to be honest, they will tell you what's broken. And my employees were no different. As we were going into this telephony system, I saw people clicking their heels and clapping their hands because our previous system would continuously shut down, or they would need to log in and log out, or the customer would say they sounded like a robot on the call. So this itself, it contributed a great deal to our employee satisfaction as well as our customer satisfaction. And the way that we measure that was not just a function of our CSAT scores, which are currently sitting in the neighborhood of 94% overall combined for all of our geographies, but we also saw a great increase in our annual Net Promoter Score. And our Net Promoter Score in the first year went from 42 points to 47 points as a function of this transition. We also saw, and I spoke about employee satisfaction, we also saw the benefits that we gained from our omni-channel experience. Now, what I love about the omni-channel experience is that we now have visibility into things that were on different platforms in a singular platform. We have visibility into our chat channels. We have visibility into call transcriptions while they're talking on the phone. We have visibility into our call queues, our email queues, and it all functions together as one under one entity. And that was a game changer for us. So as I transition to the next phase of this, the one thing that I want to leave you with is if you're thinking about transitioning to a telephony system, you want to make sure that you don't necessarily just have a vendor. You want a partner. And that's what I saw in our experiences working with this transition. We saw someone who wasn't necessarily out to just get a PO, but someone who listened to us and allowed us to act as the subject matter experts that we were, but also challenged us to think about what's next and what's to come and where our future could be with our telephony system as we transition from a customer service organization to a customer success organization. So I am certainly excited about the next steps with our transition, and I'm excited about the future of our transition as well. And with that, I am going to pass over to Mark.
And the future is here with the Salesforce Contact Center with Amazon Connect, which is essentially a package that is within the App Exchange that you can install natively within SCV that unlocks additional Connect capabilities like chat, in-app voice, and unified routing. And in terms of those feature sets, we're going to dive into a little bit of what the preview is, and we'll talk about each of those sets of capabilities there as well. And in terms of the first set of capabilities around there, the first one is around being able to leverage BYO capabilities in terms of Amazon Connect chat and SMS natively within the Salesforce Unified Agent experience. And part of that is really now when a chat comes into Amazon Connect, you're able to essentially route that through our IVR, and when you go through our self-service experience and unable to resolve that, that can now essentially be escalated to the agent through that last mile, and that natively gets served into the Salesforce omni-channel experience overall. The other capability is today, in terms of what you typically see here with unified agent experience for within SCV, you see the aspect around the ability to have telephony today, but now with SCC AC, you continue to unlock that. And let me just say real quick, you're going to hear me use the term SCCAC because we need more acronyms. So it's a lot easier to say that than having to say the Salesforce Contact Center with Amazon Connect for the rest of this presentation. So, and with that additional set of capabilities, we essentially get to unlock in-app web, video calling, as well as screen share. For the preview, we're going to be initially supporting the aspects around in-app web calling, which I'll demo in a little bit and show you some of that. And then we'll fast follow around supporting video and screen sharing capabilities there as well. In terms of unified routing, we unlock additional capabilities in terms of today within Connect, right? You can route voice, now you can route chat, right, as part of this integrated solution. But now, in addition to that, you can also route additional Salesforce objects. So, for example, you can take your cases and leveraging the external routing within Salesforce, now route those natively within Amazon Connect's IVR experience. The advantage of that is essentially now you can simplify your implementation, particularly around those self-service experiences that really enable you to save cost and simplify that implementation across your contact center. On the Salesforce side, it also helps in terms of unified routing around removing some of the sharp edges that we see today when we have with Salesforce Chat, as well as within Amazon Connect's voice capabilities unified there together as well. And then in terms of the package setup and the installation natively within Service Cloud Voice, if you've set up, and we'll see this in the demo, when you set up Service Cloud Voice, we are a natural integrated extension into that setup process. So we make it super easy in terms of being able to set that up within a few minutes after you set up Service Cloud Voice. And with that, we'll jump into the demo. Demo here. Great. So for the demo, we're going to really cover a few personas through each of these. And the first persona that we're going to talk through is Nikki is essentially the end customer. She's calling in. She's having issues with her solar panels. And so she's looking for some help. As part of that, she's going to be talking to John, the agent, is part of that interaction. Once we get through that demo, we'll then walk through the aspects of Diego. And he's going to be the supervisor monitoring the set of agents, right, in terms of what we call any company energy. And then as part of that, once we complete that demo, we'll then show you when you actually have to set up SCV, what does that look like, right? And I'll walk you through that, and we'll have Nikhil as the admin walking through that from a persona perspective. And this is a recorded demo that was, obviously from a live demo, because live demos always go really well. They don't. So that's why we recorded it. I can also bend time and space a little bit as I go through this process, right? So I can go a lot faster right through the demos from that perspective. So we have Nikki, right? She's calling it, right? She's using the Any Company web application, mobile application. And I'm going to show you the 3 variations of her essentially calling in and trying to get her issue resolved. We'll show it through the what we often see today with SCV. Natively, right? If you're already using SCV, you'll say, well, that looks very familiar, right? So we'll walk you through that just to sort of set a baseline in terms of how that experience works today with an SCV. And then we'll start to expand on that now with SCC involved. You can now essentially enable our in-app voice aspects of that as well. Then we'll show the chat as part of that as well. So you'll see us kind of go through each of those variations of the experience as we go through the demo. So Nikki's calling in, right? You can see the telephony mobile application there calling in, right? This is the dashboard. Now, she went through the Connect IVR. She's going through a self-service experience. She could be using Lex. She could be using Q and Connect as part of that self-service experience. As part of that interaction, essentially a case was created, and now that case is now, through that self-service interaction, she wasn't able to get her issue resolved, so now that's going to get served up to John as the agent. So the call comes in, answers the call, the screen pop comes up. You can see here there's a number of components that show up here within Service Cloud. You see the call control panel, right? That's essentially allowing you to interact with the voice call. You see the transcription window, so the real-time transcription coming from Contact Lens served into this. You see the information about her as a contact because it's a telephone number, right? We're triggering off that and serving that information here as well. you'll see next best action. So now we're also looking at, we're going to be listening to the intents coming from contact lens and triggering next best actions as part of that interaction as well. And then you see the case. The case was opened up as part of the interaction from the IVR perspective. Great, so the call comes in, real-time transcription is happening, right? So that real-time transcription is coming. You see the next best action there. So John and Nikki have been talking, right? And essentially John figures out, well, we're gonna have to schedule an appointment. We need to get a technician on site to go inspect our solar panels because there's those issues. That intent was picked up through contact lens. Essentially there's prompted for it. And now John basically goes through that workflow with an OmniFlows to essentially set that up and then set up that appointment. At this point, the call is basically done. So we're gonna end the call. And at that point, we're gonna go into after call work. So the agent now hits the all done, and then we're in after call work. After call work now, the agent go back, play back the recording, right, to essentially, maybe make sure go through the notes, make sure they miss anything. But giving you a little bit of an early preview, there's also some call summarization here taking place as well with some aspects of the sentiment, giving you a little bit of preview in terms of what's coming. So the agent can take all of that information and complete the call from an ACW perspective. So great, the call's wrapped up. So now, let's go back to the mobile application and let's rewind, all right? And instead of Nikki coming in through the telephony side, she's gonna come in through the in-app experience. And the advantage of this is essentially now, any company has a native mobile application, and when she essentially calls in, we have flexibility around that UI that you can now leverage around that in-app calling. So you can think about this in terms of use cases that could be either natively within that mobile application, or if you have a website, right, say a retail website, for example, right, you can have that embedded in there. It's also a really great way in terms of when customers, say, are chatting with you and you need to escalate the call from a chat to a voice call to video to screen share, right? You can see how that progresses, and that's fairly straightforward to do with these type of channels that are involved. It's a lot easier than telephony, right? Because telephony, you saw earlier, right, pops up essentially telephony UX. In addition to that, the customer's not paying for the call as part of that interaction. So again, we're gonna see here, it's very similar, right? Comes in, the in-app call comes in. One thing to note, right, as that call is taking place is we authenticated the user within the mobile application. Right? So when using in-app calling, there's no phone number, right? So you might use an email or some other aspects of how you authorize that user when they came into your web application or your mobile application as part of that. But again, all of that context gets passed in and again provided within Salesforce to present that to the agent as well. So again, you can see we're going through the same steps, and I'm going to let it play through because it's going through the same same interaction model, right? And again, this is the advantage of using this unified interface within Salesforce. Now let's do a chat. So the chat comes in, essentially now doing that interaction, from a chat perspective. Nikki's now chatting with the bot. It's now going to escalate to the agent, right? Chat comes in. Again, you see, whether it's a voice call, an in-app call, a chat, it's all using the native integration within Salesforce in terms of the native omni-channel UX here as well. Chat comes in, does a screen pop. You'll see, again, a little bit different layout because now we're interacting more with a chat than a voice call. So we see the core chat window here as part of this. The other aspect to note here is because we have this deep integration into Salesforce, not only are you able to take advantage of the capabilities with Amazon Connect Chat and SMS, but you're also able to take advantage of the capabilities within Salesforce's chat. So for example, being able to have canned replies or being able to raise a flag to a supervisor, you can leverage those capabilities natively because of that deep integration that we have. And I'll show that when we get a little bit to the supervisor experience. So we're going through, and again, same thing, going through the different motions here, right? Very similar, right? In terms of going through that workflow overall around that, right? And then getting into after call work, and then finishing up the call there as well. So again, you see the consistency, you see in terms of channels, the ease in terms of which you can set that up and have that routing work end-to-end natively from Connect into Salesforce. So let's go to the next demo. So now we're going to show the supervisor. So we got Dago, the supervisor, monitoring the contact center. Sees his dashboard, right? So he's got his built-in dashboard within Service Cloud. And now essentially he's going to look at the different calls that he has, from a voice call or in-app call, as well as going to look at chats. Again, the advantage that we have now with having SCC built natively into SCV is we can take advantage of a lot of the built-in objects that are there in Salesforce, a lot of the native objects. So we can now take advantage of the voice object as well as the native messaging object there as part of that, and you'll see that in terms of what that native look and feel looks like. So as a supervisor, I can go back to Nikki's earlier call that she had. I can see the context of that call. I can see the information that had that call. I can see the sentiment of the call. So again, I get a full view of that interaction that Nikki and John had earlier on. And then in terms of the message, same thing. I can go in. I can look at the different objects there as well in terms of the messaging, the different messages there. Great, I see that. I click on it, and now I can see, again, render that rendered view similar to what you saw with the agent. The supervisor can go in here and look at, all aspects of the conversation in terms of the call summary, the chat summary here as well, and see all that information as part of that interaction. Now, essentially, Diego wants to go and see how his agents are doing, and goes into essentially to Salesforce Omni Supervisor. And again, because we have this deep integration, chats, the in-app voice, these all show up, with the other voice calls, with the other chat calls that are here integrated within Omni Supervisor. So Diego goes in, right, is able to see the work that John has been working on, right? So working on some cases, has got a voice call going on as well. But during this interaction, John actually he's looking for approval on a warranty extension that Nikki was asking for. So essentially, he hits the raise a flag that I mentioned earlier in the chat, and that now eventually pops up to Diego. Diego then sees that chat from John, right? Is able to answer, right? Answer that. And the great thing with this is because we're using the contact lens transcription as part of this integration. Mm-hmm. You could be multiple agents. You could have one window here. You could have 5 windows. And again, it allows a bit more scalability in terms of being able to monitor and interact with your agents by the fact that you're using that integrated chat capability, within Service Cloud Voice. So now let's move over to the, it's all great, right? We saw the agent customer experience. We saw the supervisor experience. So now let's look at what it takes to set this up. So now we're going to go to Nikhil, who's the admin. So this is essentially, if you go to install Service Cloud Voice, this is essentially the setup. You go through, setting up initially, and again, I'm bending time and space. We're going to go super fast through the setup process. We're going to set up Service Cloud Voice. All right, enable that. Now we're going to enable the package. So I mentioned earlier, right, this is a free App Exchange package that we install on top of Service Cloud Voice. And now the advantage of that is with this integration here is you don't have to go out to the App Exchange, download it. It's all natively built into the SCV setup process. So essentially, we're going to click here to install the package. So we're just going to go through a series of steps to essentially add some information about the contact center in terms of naming. We're going to assign an admin, great, and then we're going to create, essentially the contact center for Service Cloud Voice. It's all set, right? That's been created. We're going to go through the steps there. Now we're essentially going to configure Salesforce or SCC AC as part of that. So now we go through those steps to set that up. If you're familiar with the setup process as part of Service Cloud Voice, there's contact center configurations. Again, SCC AC is a natural extension of that. So it understands all the setup that's already been done with SCV, and we just add on to that. So for example, when you're syncing up queues within SCV, we're able to, we get all that information and we leverage that as part of the setup experience as well. So essentially we're going to go in, set up SCC AC, we're going to go into the contact center here. And again, this is where we'll start to set up other aspects of the features in terms of what you want to opt in as part of that setup experience. So again, showing you, within a few minutes, you can have, you set up SCV, and you set up SCC AC, and then essentially you're good to go. So with that, let's go back to the slides. And we switch. Excellent. And with our strategic partnership with Salesforce, we actually have some exciting new developments. One thing I'll say is make sure you stop by the Salesforce booth to learn more about Salesforce solutions through the AWS marketplace. Great new aspects in terms of what you can do in terms of buying Salesforce licenses right through the AWS marketplace. A lot of advantages to that, as well as look at in terms of Redshift and Data Cloud with zero copy ETL, as well as looking at bring your own large language models with Amazon Bedrock. If you want to see or talk more about the demo, happy to meet you at the AWS booth, but also feel free to stop by. We can show you another demo of it, get into more details around that as well. And then in terms of also Amazon Q for Business, there's a session tomorrow around that as well to really look at sort of the latest generative AI capabilities with Agentforce and Q for Business. And then in terms of the remaining sessions for reInvent tomorrow, definitely check out the remaining sessions that we have here. I'll leave it up for a second if people want to take any screenshots, with the camera. But yeah, some really great sessions tomorrow. So for the folks for the final day of reInvent, definitely attend those. And with that, let's jump into the panel discussion.
Thank you, Mark. This is really exciting. Long time in the works here, and really exciting to kind of see it come to fruition.
I'm super excited.
Yes, yes. So one question that I have is, what's the broader strategy for AWS and Salesforce that led to this launch in 2024?
Yeah, so we've been on a journey, right, with Amazon Connect and Salesforce. For those of you who've been around, we started with the CTI adapter back in 2017. We worked, as Laura mentioned earlier, we worked super closely with Salesforce and getting SCV built and now widely successful, right? And as we saw earlier, but what we heard from customers is, one is SCV is great, but we want more Connect capabilities, right? And that really was starting to us ourselves and talking with Salesforce. You're like, how do we enable more of those features more natively within SCV? Right, really start to bring together the capabilities that we had in CTI and SCV and really unify those overall. So that really started that journey in terms of how do we get there. And today, you see this today with generative AI, right? We're both moving so fast, right? And we want to give our customers, choice and capabilities, and also, but make it easy, right? Like that earlier slide here, right, where you said, how do we make this where the fact that we can improve that time to value, right? This type of solution is what's solving for that, right? It's enabling our customers to move faster with the latest set of features that both Salesforce and Amazon Connect have.
Awesome, love it. All right, Chantel, several burning questions that I know the audience is going to want to know. I'd love to know how many agents you have today and how they're distributed globally.
Yes. Today, I have about 300 agents across the globe in every continent with the exception of Antarctica. The majority of them are located in the US.
Okay. And that's just a portion of what Pearson has overall in terms of agents with the higher ed.
Yes, we have thousands of agents, champions across our organization.
And they're all running Service Cloud Voice as well.
They are.
So impressive numbers there.
Yeah.
Speaking of numbers, you talked about KPIs and the importance of measuring the business and being able to report on that. What KPIs matter most to Pearson? And can you share kind of what success you've had so far?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, as a contact center leader, we look at things like average speed to answer, after call work, first call resolution. But as I alluded to, I am not a traditional contact center leader. I came from sales. So I would say that one of the most important measures, I would say, is revenue generated, revenue saved, and cost avoidance are KPIs that I would definitely look at. And one of the things that we are looking at now, I know Mark was sharing about the workforce management tools. We're using an outsourced workforce management tool that's not in Service Cloud Voice, and we're in a space right now where we're evaluating how to utilize the workforce management tools within the system that we have, since it's available to us, to avoid paying an additional cost. And I think ultimately, if we're able to avoid a cost, save money, that supports Pearson's overall bottom line.
Yep, And Mark, that plays right into
Yes.
the strategy of being able to continually add innovation.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. And you mentioned workforce management. Again, those are, the fact that now we're unifying those channels natively, between Connect and Salesforce, you can start to take advantage of those, right? Within, with leveraging that with that integration that we have today with Salesforce.
Yeah.
So no big project goes without some challenges. Would love to know what your company faced in your previous contact center solution and kind of what drove you to Service Cloud Voice.
When I think about that question, the first thing that comes to mind was timing. So as I mentioned earlier, we started the implementation and the discovery in 2022. And during that time, there was a lot of buzz around AI. And while Pearson is a company that's been using AI for well over a decade, we were very cautious, like many other organizations, on what this implementation could look like. So as I think about the specific challenges that we had with our previous vendor, the thing that we struggle with the most is the fact that they were the right solution for the past, but they weren't the right solution for where we were going. They couldn't keep up with the evolution of AI. They couldn't keep up with the changing dynamics of our customers and the shape of our markets. So that proved very, very challenging, and it wasn't something that we could afford, honestly. When you think about the cost to do nothing, it was very expensive. So we found ourselves in a space where we really wanted to lean into how do we future-proof our organization and how do we prepare our organization for the future of what contact centers look like. And I believe that that was one of the main challenges that we saw with our previous vendor. There was a great deal of fragmentation, and there wasn't a strategy or a way that we could work together to future-proof our organization and prepare us for the future.
Yes. Well, speaking of the future, Mark, what should customers anticipate in terms of future innovation cycles for this new solution?
Yeah, and if you look at where we're going, you saw a lot of new releases that we've announced this week around QIC and WhatsApp integration. So one is you can start to already take advantage of those capabilities. Again, because that's already integrated into our chat capabilities and our IVR capabilities. But as we go forward, we're looking at how do we take more of those native Connect capabilities like QIC, guides, right, and enable those more into the unified Salesforce agent experience as part of that as well. We're working closely with Salesforce around Agentforce, right? So Agentforce service agents, right? We know we have some customers that also want to enable that natively within Connect. So we're working through that also. So again, there's a lot of great things coming. So definitely stay tuned. We'd love people to participate in the preview, give us feedback, all right, as we continue to iterate and improve upon the capabilities.
Sounds good. All right, Chantel, the implementation, and you mentioned NeuroFlash was involved in the implementation. Would love to understand that process, the migration, and then what were the key considerations and challenges that you faced during your implementation?
I'll start off with the key considerations. The key considerations that we thought through even before having a conversation with any vendor was the longevity of that relationship. I knew as a leader we were transitioning out of the service space and more in the sales space and integrating both, and we needed to make sure that we had a solution, a vendor and a partner, if you will, that would support that. The other key considerations is partnership. I went to an executive summit about a month ago, and we were having a conversation around the differences between a vendor and a partner, and oftentimes those words are used interchangeably. A vendor offers a service to you. A partner also offers a service to you, but they're also functioning and acting as a consultant. And that's what we appreciated in the relationship that we established was we weren't just transitioning to a telephony system to use it as a phone as you would have historically. We were looking at how do we prepare this very complicated business unit, and I mean complicated because I support customer service, customer support, inside sales, renewals, accounts receivable, and the different business units function so vastly different. And in that partnership, we didn't just look at this is a contact center, you take inbound and outbound phone calls. It was very prescriptive in the approach of making sure that, one, we got what we asked for and some, and also took the care with us as we were going through these many transitions. As I mentioned, we transitioned in waves by geography. So that was a very important piece for us as we were thinking through that. And then the other thing I will say, as a leader, I've done many telephony transitions. One of the things that I was worried about at the beginning was scope creep. You get a PO, you send it up, you get it approved, and you're like, this is the cost. And then 6 months later, you get a bigger PO, requesting a bigger PO for something in addition. And I will say that in my experience, in this transition, we did not have that. All of the costs were clear and fair up front, and all of the communication was concise. We still talked to our partners at NeuroFlash too. They helped us on other projects outside of this as well. So it went beyond just this project. That's what I will say I appreciated most.
Yeah, and they have great experience both in Salesforce implementations and in Amazon Connect and other AWS services. So yeah, very, very important to pick the right partner.
Very important.
Partner being the key word.
Yes.
Very good. All right, Mark.
Yes.
How can customers sign up for this preview, and how does Salesforce and AWS charge for this service?
Sure. So in terms of the preview, if you've followed all of our What's New post, right, as I like to call it, it's Christmas at AWS, or in terms of all the What's New posts. There's a lot of them. You'll see in the one particularly for SCCAC, you'll actually see there's a link there to sign up for the preview. So definitely sign up. We'll then reach back out to you in terms of participating in the preview. We have some criteria in terms of participating in that preview going forward. So that's we'd love to have a conversation with you and ensure that you're a good fit for that, particularly as we have it's a pretty short timeline from a preview perspective. So, but again, feel free to sign up. If you can't find it, you can just look up me on LinkedIn. You'll see it in my feed as well, as from that perspective. So, and then in terms of the pricing. So if you're familiar today with how Service Cloud Voice works, that pricing is the same. Essentially, there's you'll have the bundle in terms of where Salesforce, you essentially buy it from Salesforce, and all the billing happens through them. Again, as I mentioned, this package is free, so that installs on top of that, and those those additional services will pass through in terms of charging you as a customer. If you're using BYOA, which is where we'll see a number of folks tend to do that, that allows you really to, one, you buy essentially the Service Cloud Voice license. You will also, for chat, you'll need digital engagement as part of that. And then essentially all the Connect billing goes through your normal AWS account. You can take advantage of the EDPs and other things that are part of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, we have just a couple minutes left. Chantel, any final insights you'd like to share?
I will go back to the point about the differences between a vendor and a partner. I know that as leaders in organizations, we are sometimes constrained by budgets and speed to production and speed to solution. I would definitely encourage you to spend some time ensuring that you have someone that's not there for the moment, but someone that goes along with you on the journey as you evolve. That's what comes to mind.
Good advice. Mark, how about from you?
From my perspective, I'm really excited in terms of what we've built here. And when I've been talking to customers, a lot of customers have been just reacting super positively in terms of, one, the choice that they have now, the additional capabilities that can leverage, and really, how do we help you solve your use cases that much more quickly? So, love to engage, love to have the conversation. For those of you already on Service Cloud, great, awesome. Let's have that conversation and continue that momentum.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. So we do ask you to complete the session survey. Your feedback is very valued by us, and we'll incorporate it into future sessions. Thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of reInvent.
Thank you.